Hi there, my name is Anitya Shah and I help grow some of our new and existing businesses at Symphony. Now, we've been building software for 15 years at Symphony for the leading private equity firms, for venture-backed startups, for Fortune 500, for some of the largest technology companies in the world, and we have never been in a more exciting time. We are truly living and breathing the exponential curve of artificial intelligence, and us as technologists also have a hard time keeping up sometimes, even though we're living and breathing this on a day-to-day basis. So we were thinking, if we have to sprint to keep up, our clients and friends must have a lot of questions. Businesses are being transformed in front of our very eyes, and we wanted to bring you along on this journey as we talk to friends of Symphony and get battle stories from the field. So I hope you enjoy this series that we're starting out with. In our first episode, Akshay, a principal product strategist at Symphony, has a conversation with Greg Nicastro, who's a long-time product and technology executive and a current operating partner at Edison Partners. And they talk about the role of the digital operating partner, why it's important to measure software in the first place, why does this matter to operators and investors, and how to leverage practical frameworks like DORA in your DevOps and your overall development process. Very exciting conversation, and I hope you enjoy it on our first episode of Beyond the Code.
The role of the tech operating partner.
Welcome, Greg. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Akshay.
Before we start, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day role as an operating partner, where you feel you add most value on the product and technology side to your portfolio companies?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do it. So there's several elements to the operating partner role. So I think the most important one really is building community amongst our chief technology officers and chief product officers so that they kind of get to know each other and can leverage each other. And I facilitate that almost like a point guard in basketball, if you will. So, and I usually do it around topics that I know are of interest, and import. And some of that is self-serving for Edison in terms of things we want them to focus on. And other stuff is stuff that I know that if they have the time to do it, they do it. And since I have the time and it's my job, I kind of tee those kinds of topics up for them, Obviously something like DORA being one of them relative to, engineering measurement or measurement and productivity.
Yep.
But, and yet, so that's one part of it is community building. Another part of the role is doing technical diligence on new potential portfolio companies, also doing mentoring and coaching as necessary within the portfolio. So some of the leaders, can leverage me as another set of eyes, if you will, right? And they'll do that from time to time. And then, we do other more general things like, getting together when we bring our limited partners in and talk to some of the limited partners about how we work in value creation, how we interact with the portfolio companies. Our approach is very much a pull-centric approach. So we don't hand anybody, a script and say, hey, here's how we want to run product, or here's how we want to run engineering at XYZ, Portco. It's more a pull-oriented thing. We lay out kinds of things we like to do. An example of one is once we've done diligence on a company and we decide to invest in them, we build a 180-day plan and sometimes a second 180-day plan where we work with them on goals and objectives around the things that need to get, closed out and improved based on the gaps we found.
Why it's important to measure software development metrics.
Before we start talking about DORA specifically, you mentioned this in your role description, but why don't we take a step back and fundamentally, can you tell us why why we need to start measuring software development effectiveness and metrics. Like why is this important to your portfolio companies and to you and your role as an operating partner?
Yeah. So, well, from the portfolio, I mean, from the investor perspective, it's critically important to measure the second most or the most significant, expense that these, growth codes have, right? So R&D is a significant expense. So there's always going to be some focus on, hey, are we as productive and efficient, as we can be? From a leadership perspective, though, I mean, how do you get better at anything without measuring? Like, how could you have even been interested in getting into engineering or software development if there wasn't some element of sort of measure and determine the impact and then make adjustments, right? It just seems like that's a natural thing. And then I guess lastly, I would just say that, and it's kind of similar to what that point, the measurement point, but development, like helping people get better at what they do, right? I mean, and that's, personal and professional growth. So I think, those are some of the reasons I think it's important. But the most pragmatic is it's a big investment, and folks need to be comfortable that they're getting their max value and max return out of that investment.
Software development metrics as a catalyst for growth.
How do you make sure with stuff like software development measurement that we really use this as a catalyst and it's not seen as something that is bureaucratic?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, the leader has to be the leader of the function has to be on board with the methodology and the sort of the theme, the thematic approach. That's the first and foremost, because then that person can genuinely get their troops on board, right? From middle management right on down to senior level developers and down through right through, freshers, right? Yep. So to me, that's kind of where it starts. You got to get comfortable that you're doing the right things. I've been doing this for over 40 years, okay? And we've never been able to agree on as a community, on how to do this in a way that doesn't do more harm than good until relatively recently. So when I think about that 40 years, right, you didn't start, in my view, getting credible work done in and around this topic, until probably 2010, 11. So it took a long time, at least one man's point of view, right? So yeah, it's a hard topic generally. You can do more harm than good if you don't know what the hell you're doing. Sure. So a lot of it has to do with how thoughtful is the leader, right? I mean, how much has the leader thought about why we're measuring, how we're measuring, why it's going to help his team, first and foremost, or her team, first and foremost. And then, of course, you have to be able to report up. Like, what CEO or board is not going to make inquiry about R&D as a percent of revenue? At least when we're talking about, growth companies, they're all going to look at that, right? And they're all going to say, oh, okay, well, that's either a little bit high or a little bit low, or it looks just right. And you have to be in a position to say, yeah, it may look just right, but it isn't. Here's why. Or the reason that it's high is for these three reasons. So it's going to have to stay there at least for a while. And oh, by the way, the punchline is always, what are you doing to make yourself more productive and efficient? And if your answer is, look, this is more of an art form than it is a science, and we're not doing a whole hell of a lot, you can cover that up any way you like, but it's becoming less and less an acceptable answer, okay? And especially now, in this rightfully or wrongfully, especially now with AI kicking in.
What is DORA and why does it matter?
So for me, I mean, everyone's DORA story is probably a little bit different, but my DORA story is I started, when I was in grad school, I got really interested in small batch size manufacturing, okay? And those techniques, made a lot of sense for a number of different industries. And then when I started to kind of, work on this whole area of how do we make, development more productive and efficient, as a system, started reading some of Gene Kim's work and, everything from, he published a number of books in concert with others. And, DevOps Handbook was one of the first ones I read. And then there's some interesting and fun ones like, the Phoenix Project. But what really landed with me was, Accelerate, right? And Nicole Forsgren and her work in particular. So, to me, what's special about, DORA and the DORA metrics, and, just kind of from a review perspective, I think folks probably know, but the key metrics in DORA are change lead time, deployment frequency, change failure rate, and failed deployment recovery time. So those are sort of the core. But what's compelling is all the work she did, okay, and all the research she did, basically tying, if you're doing, I'm going to use a high level, if you're doing well against those metrics, then you're excelling as a software development organization. And if you're excelling as a software development organization, your business, you're either a software company or a software enabled company, is likely one of the top performers in your industry. Okay, so the for me, in addition to validating what I have always thought, because if you look at these metrics, I mean, how does, when you think about it, well, you can deploy more frequently if you're deploying smaller bits of code, okay? Yep. And you can get value in the hands of customers more quickly if you choose to do it that way, okay? Mm-hmm. You can recover from failures quicker because you're deploying smaller batches of code, okay? Right. You can fix them faster. There's your failed deployment recovery time. If you're deploying smaller batches of code, you can make sure that your failure rate is smaller. Again, so to me, the analogy, and again, everyone's journey is a little different. For me, the analogy was perfect with small batch size manufacturing. Then as I studied the area and then started applying it as a practitioner running product and engineering in these companies, I started to see the value in it.
DORA adoption challenges.
Let's then talk about adoption, right? Because I know from personal experience that you've been working with a lot of your leaders to sell the vision of DORA to get it adopted. What has worked, and where have you had challenges with getting people to start thinking in this way?
Yeah. So my biggest tip on this is full transparency. So, and let me tell you what I mean exactly by that. So where I think it works well is when you're real with your team and you tell them, yes, we do need to measure ourselves for the purposes of is executive leadership comfortable that we're as productive and efficient as we need to be, okay? And so let's all get our arms and our minds wrapped around that. And my suspicion is none of you would object to that, except for the fact that you think a lot of the ways to measure us suck, okay? All right, so let's start with that. Number two is, here's why this particular mechanism should really work in both directions. It should work to make us better at what we do, okay? And once you get comfortable with what it is and why it is, okay, I think that the team will see, yeah, this will work for us. This makes sense. We just have to be thoughtful about the way we implement it, and we have to spend more time on the enabling capabilities and turning those into goals and objectives, or
yes,
OKRs, etc. Right?
Capabilities that shift the needle.
You've mentioned the capability sections a couple of times, and as you said, yeah, it's nice because they're a cheat sheet. for what you need to do to excel in these. But are there any of those capabilities that you would particularly call out as, these are ones where you think they really significantly shift the needle, that you've seen companies have real success going down those lines?
Yeah, so it depends on it so depends on the company, like where the company is in their, motion. Some companies, for example, may have all the automation is huge at multiple levels of the development process into production. I mean, for obvious reasons, right? So let's say a company's more mature in that regard. They've got all the right tooling in place, everything's well automated, et cetera. But some of their metrics still aren't where they need to be, right? What's the culture like, right? So there's an example of, we've got the right tech supporting what we're doing, but we're still not seeing the scoring. And do we have some kind of a culture related? And one of the things that I think matters a lot is that. So that's just one example. But if I was going to tick through a few, a couple of notes on my favorite. So monitoring, okay, obvious. Think about metrics, you think about monitoring, right? Okay. Test automation, deployment automation, right? Shifting left on security, okay? Because it's critical. AppSec is critical, and this whole shift left on quality is probably 15, 20 years old now. Right? If you look at security as a subset of quality, it's a more recent entrant, right? But AppSec's critically important, and shifting left on application security is important to this. But you can see how the nature of this model makes it easier to do that. Because again, what are you scanning? You're scanning smaller chunks of code. If you're doing it right, it leads to a perfect opportunity to say, hey, here's one of my board goals for, 2025. I want to go from where I am today in terms of employee engagement score to something higher. And these are the things I'm going to do to get there.
Overview of DORA survey results.
Moving on then, this is a survey that's come out every year. In December, we got the 2024 survey results. And I just wanted to get your view on the key takeaways from that report. I know one of the insights in the previous conversation you talked about, it really resonated with you. So you want to just give us some views on what came out in 2024?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things. One was the idea that there were quite a few high performing and elite level teams, and some might, I know my audience pretty well. So some of them might immediately go, oh yeah, they're gaming the system, they're doing that, they're doing this, right? But let's assume that for the moment, that's fine, because if they're gaming the system, I may be perfectly comfortable with that. Because gaming the system, as long as they've got goals and objectives around those things that will drive the scores up on, the four, their core four metrics, it's good. It's directionally good. So first thing I saw, I like the idea that there are more and more that are in the high and elite categories. And for those that aren't, it gives you that much more of an opportunity to get there. In a lot of ways, it's just like manufacturing in a manufacturing line. Right? If you put something off, collects dust, then getting back and figuring out whether it meets quality specs and does it work, it's more complicated in my view in software.
The role of AI in software development.
Outside of the DORA report, right? Like, it would be really great just to hear your perspective on how do you think AI is going to impact our craft as software developers and product people?
I think the survey, though, presented some really good news. Is that the engineers seem to be saying, "Hey, look, this is the latest thing. We've got to get our arms wrapped around it and figure out how to leverage it, because if not, we're going to end up in the wrong spot. Like so I think there's some fear in that survey. There's clearly some fear there for the long term. Okay. But a huge percentage are embracing it. So you got like 75+% of the people surveyed are using some form of AI tooling to facilitate more productive, development. I did find it ironic that some of the DORA scores got worse as a result of it, and that's because we're all still trying to learn how to use it. I think that's the best way I would say it. We're all still trying to learn how to use it. Even folks that don't program for a living could look at this and say, if you've ever done even just a minor search, they give you more information. Like if you're using ChatGPT, you'll get more information than you may ever want to use.
Yes.
Right? And I'm sure in some of the coding, that's what some of the outputs look like. So you end up with bigger chunks than would conform to what we want in a DORA model.